Russell, I sent you a Create TV invite or Skype invite.
All right, good afternoon, everyone. And welcome to the March 7th Public Safety and Justice Committee meeting. I'm Supervisor Ellenberg, chair of this committee, and we are joined by Supervisor Wasserman, who is the vice chair. To get us going, I'd like to ask all of the committee members to introduce yourselves so we have everyone's name on the record, please.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Josefina Covarrubias. I am the Administrative Service Manager 3 for the Chief Medical Examiner, Dr. Michelle Jordan, and I'm filling in for her today.
Jeff Rosen, District Attorney.
Laura Garnett, Chief Probation Officer.
Damon Silver from the Public Defender's Office.
Rick Song, Undersheriff, filling in for Sheriff Lori Smith.
Aaron Johnson, Pretrial Services.
Ted Zahner, Assistant Presiding Judge, filling in for Judge Deborah Ryan.
Jeff Smith, County Executive.
Steve Mitra, Assistant County Counsel.
Gary Hersig, Deputy County Executive.
Sylvia Perez McDonald, Independent Defense Counsel Office.
Thank you all very much. We'll now move on to receive public comment. This portion of the agenda is set aside for members of the public wishing to speak on non-agenda items. Thank you for the cards. I want to make sure if anybody is out there that has a comment that hasn't submitted a card to please do that right away. I understand that one or more members of the public has requested to use the county's audio and video system as part of their public comment. As described on the first page of the published agenda for board and committee meetings, the chair of the committee has the discretion to limit or prohibit the use of the county systems during public comment. And after consultation, I've decided not to use audio or not to provide the use of audio or video system for public comment by anyone during PSJC meetings. And the reason for this is that my goal is to ensure that the public comment portion of the meeting allows all members of the public who want to speak to do so without any potential delays due to technology issues in queuing up videos or audio content. That said, I want to be clear that all speakers may comment on whatever they choose and provide whatever written materials they choose. And if any speaker desires to do so, the speaker may orally or in writing provide the link information for any videos the speaker chooses, and they will be submitted into the record. And with that said, I'm going to call up our public speakers. You're welcome to line up at the podium in any order, and I would ask that you state your name. I'll call a few first. State your name clearly for the record. And since we have quite a plethora, looks like we've got more than, give me just 1 second, 4, 5, 6. We've got more than 10 speakers, which means that public comment will be limited to 1 minute, please. So Dennis Emmett, Susan Bassey, Scott Largent. Hold on. Okay, sorry. Give me 1 second here. I've got to organize it. I thought they would be sorted. Anything else on two? That's consent calendar. Okay. Let me revise that. We have 3 comments under public comment. So we can go bump back up to 2 minutes per speaker. Dennis Emmett, Susan Bassey, and Scott Largent, come on up, please. Okay. 3 minutes per speaker in public comment. We're there now. And go ahead, sir.
Hi, my name is Dennis Emmett. I'm with the Santa Clara County Correctional Peace Officers Association. I want to address the board, the community, and the public officials here in attendance and acknowledge that our membership feels heard and respected. Our mission is directed by the Sheriff's Office, to supported by this board, and to commit to the improvement of the community and Jail reforms have been a success because of this collaborative effort by all stakeholders. I am hopeful that we will continue to achieve this as a priority. Only by working together can we achieve great things for Santa Clara County residents. This board has a responsibility to ask questions and make informed decisions based on the best information available. The goal in the end is always public safety. I respectfully ask that we look at where we want to be in the future and what it will take to get there. Decisions made today have consequences. We have a long road ahead of us to achieve all the recommendations made by the Blue Ribbon Commission. Please continue to be mindful of the overall goals to achieve this great endeavor and what is needed to maintain our course. Do not be swayed by short-term issues that in the long term may hinder our course, undue delay in our progress. My name is Dennis Emmett. I'm a board member with the Santa Clara County Correctional Peace Officers Association. Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Good morning. My name is Susan Bassey, and we get 3 minutes for speaking, Ms. Ellenberg. And I want to say to you first that you are new to this committee. You are new to elected office in this county, and your decision to not play a video that was critical of Mr. Rosen, that shows Mr. Rosen making fun of handicapped people, that shows Mr. Rosen bragging about a dismal failure in his office, that shows Mr. Rosen bragging about managing $10 million worth of photos, and that shows Mr. Rosen giving flowers to Karen Sununu Towery that taxpayers paid for is disgusting. And you are doing it to silent dissent. You were given today, in advance of my public comment, a package. This is 1/10 of the public records that I requested and got from the county. It shows a history of Michelle Dauber communicating with Terry Harmon from your office, Mr. Rosen, as well as Casey Calhoun and a number of other people. You can look at me when I'm talking to you, Mr. Rosen. It's disrespectful not to. For 2 years, the DA's office worked with one mom, one victim's advocate on our criminal courts, evaluating Persky's cases. When there was a peripheral investigation going on by another mom who happened to be a publisher in family courts, Mr. Rosen's office stalked her associates, harassed her, and is prosecuting her. And I know that because that's me. Mr. Rosen also allowed certain people that he claimed were worthy of advocating for victims to take photos in the criminal courthouse in violation of a standing order and signs that were posted everywhere. But he is prosecuting me for taking photos where there was no standing order and where there were no signs. This is exculpatory evidence, Mr. Rosen. Your office set up Judge Persky. You committed tax resources to get Persky recalled. There are thousands of emails between your office and Stanford. You arranged for symposiums to teach sexual assault issues on the Stanford campus, a private university, and you did nothing for the public universities in our county. You did nothing for San Jose State. You did nothing for De Anza, which had a history of baseball players assaulting people that you did nothing about. You are a disgust. You are a waste of taxpayer monies. You are corrupt, and you have protected James Towery in the family court and Karen Sununu Towery from prosecutorial misconduct, and then you gave her flowers with our taxpayer money. If this doesn't call for an immediate investigation of prosecutorial misconduct and taxpayer waste coming from our district attorney's office, and you, Ms. Ellenberg, are going to stifle dissent and allow the county to block the YouTube channel of Scott Largent, who filmed his speech where he held up a crutch of a disabled prosecutor and called him peg leg, then you will be recalled as well.
Scott Largent.
Are we having technical? Are we using this one or? Oh, okay, yeah. Normally they kind of put the thing over here, but okay. Oh well, those are the technical difficulties that we're having, Susan. Those are not playing videos. I went through this a couple of years ago regarding playing videos here in the supervisor chambers. We made sure to iron out all the details. When you'd come in here, there would be a laptop waiting right here. Everything was queued up. We didn't go into the allowed time. I mean, it was We fought for that, to be able to have it work properly. Maybe, and I noticed this in the beginning of the meeting when Mike was kind of giving you some pointers right there, maybe you could sit down with him and kind of get up to speed on some of that stuff. So then we won't have these roadblocks, and we won't have county council having to chime in. I filmed a video of our district attorney making fun of, and I don't even want to say the name, but I kind of got to, Dan Pegleg, the gentleman with the prosthetic leg. I don't necessarily have a normal prosthetic where I don't have like an arm or a leg or anything like that, and I don't know if many of you are aware, I don't have teeth. These are my teeth right here, okay? I had some pretty bad dental issues. I had a couple really bad mishaps in the Santa Clara County Jail, and this is pretty damn embarrassing, okay? So when I watch people made fun of, it hits me, it hurts me. And when I was watching your speech, which would have been great to have put up on here to show how disconnected you are from the community, okay? That would have just been, the worst part is there's another gentleman in your office that's got a boot about this high. He's got a foot that's a foot off. That guy was sitting in the back. I saw him put his head into his hands, Jeff. That's disgusting. That is just sad that you would be willing to do that and make fun of people. And what about the other gal that has the nub as an arm? What about her? These are people with disabilities, Rosen, and you are disconnected from the community. And when I walked past here coming into this meeting, you damn near slammed the door on a woman's face right there. You are just out of touch with reality. And you want to know something? We can put that video up online. That poor woman got that damn door slammed in her face. You don't get it, Jeff Rosen. You just don't get it. And that's my right to come in here and stop blocking my YouTube channel, okay? I don't know why you didn't want to play that video, Susan. I just really don't know why you wanted to do it. And all meetings now are no longer going to have videos? Well, check it out. You can get a laptop, go right up here with the laptop, ask the guy from Create TV to zoom in, and you can still play the videos. Are you going to try to stop that also? You're silencing political dissent.
Thank you. This completes public comment on all items not on the agenda and takes us to the consent calendar. We have two, is that correct?
Yes.
Two speakers to the consent calendar, and now I believe it is 2 minutes. 2 minutes per speaker, and we have Susan Bassey and Scott Largent on items on the consent calendar.
Madam Chair, if I may.
Yes.
Just 1 minute, Scott. Madam Chair, if I may. Yes, we have items 9 and 10 on the published consent calendar. I was also going to suggest today that we add items 6 and 7. And so any speakers that you have for those items would be able to come up in one time and speak to all of those items under their 2 minutes. It would be appropriate to do that now if you're all right with adding 6 and 7 onto the consent calendar.
That's fine. So then it is the speakers as well?
Yes, people that have marked.
Susan Bassey on 6 and Susan Bassey on 7, and the consent calendar. So we will roll all of those
Correct.
together.
All right, good afternoon, everybody. Scott Largent again. Sorry about that. I get a little riled up when people make fun of people with disabilities. I'm looking on this actual agenda right here at the award ceremony for the DA's office, which we had over here. We were handing out awards for agencies in our county that are absolute failures, okay? So we were giving an award out for our Domestic Violence Council. We were praising people for a committee that has 16% attendance and never really makes quorum. And that kind of threw me off. And then we bring in the gal that started the DVC. Okay, we bring her in there, we give her flowers, everybody's clapping. Why don't we start telling her the train wreck the DVC has become before we start giving her flowers, Jeff? Because I don't think that's appropriate at all. Also, when I came in here before, I watched Cindy Chavez, and I do like Cindy Chavez. I actually really do. I was upset that she was praising our presiding judge, Patricia Lucas, for her attendance at this committee. When her attendance, if you go online to the county site, you can see she was pulling about 26% as our presiding judge. I'm sure we can do better than that. We're expected to be in court on time. We're expected to have good attendance. I expect the same out of our presiding judge. And I just don't know why we reward failure. Why do we do that? Do we hand out ribbons for 56th place in our county? Why do we continue to do this? I want you to fix the DVC. I want you to fund these things properly. I want you to start attending the train wreck and seeing what's going on. I have filmed the DVC for 3 years, and it is shocking how bad it is. And these ladies right here need more funding. They need more money. And maybe, Susan, you could start going to the meetings. You're on the Office of Women's Policy. I don't think you're on it now, but maybe attend. Just go sit in there and watch what happens, and then start making things happen. Thank you.
Since, Ms. Ellenberg, you ran with your badge of having been on the Women's Policy Committee in this county for a long time, I thought you should know the impact of your work on that committee. And this last week, I received a phone call, and I've received many, and Judge Zahner, you probably are aware of the investigation that is now going on related to the private judging under CCP 638 and 639 in the court. And if you're not, you should be. And you should be aware that you denied one of my motions in my case because you didn't think Nat Hales needed to be reimbursing me for money he took, that he illegally took in private judging. But Ms. Ellenberg, there was a woman represented by Walter Hammond, who is a friend of yours and who worked on your campaign. Walter Hammond told this poor woman that she had to sell her house. And he dragged out her divorce and he put her in private judging with Catherine Gallagher. Most of you may recall that Catherine Gallagher is the wife of Judge Dancer, who was caught fixing our traffic courts. Catherine Gallagher now does private judging, but nobody would know that because the court is in non-compliance with California Rules of Court 2.834 that tells everybody what cases these private judges have. That's the investigation going on in our courts. That reaches into our public area. This poor woman had her house sold, all of her money taken in the divorce, which is a common pattern in these private judging cases. She was threatened by Judge Gallagher. She was threatened by Walter Hammond. She then had to go and pay all of his fees and was left with no money. And now, Mike, she's living in low-income housing in Los Gatos. She is a burden to taxpayers. And today, I filled out my application for the IDO office. When I started my divorce, I owned 4 businesses, 2 real properties, and had $250,000 in the bank. Today, I can't collect child support that my husband has owed, and DCSS won't do anything about it. So we are becoming a financial burden on taxpayers unnecessarily because of your mismanagement of the courts and the people in our system and the failures to address public corruption, which has been being brought to Jeff Rosen's attention since he came into office.
Thank you. This concludes public comment for this item. Supervisor Wasserman, we've moved 6 and 7 to consent. Do you have any other changes?
I would just make the motion that we approve 6, 7, 9, and 10 under consent.
Sure. I will keep 10 on consent, but I do want to make just a couple of short comments and request a report back. First, I'd like to thank the DVC members for their continued efforts to put on a really excellent conference. My staff and I have had the opportunity to attend the DV conference and found it to be tremendously informative. I would like to request that the DVC report back to this committee regarding ongoing projects and the status of vacancies on your council. I believe it's been some time since you presented, and we'd really like to hear more information. Thank you. And with that, we've approved the consent calendar and are on item 4, where we have one public comment from Susan Bassey.
So since you've terrified everybody else from speaking up, people are now coming to me to give me their stories to share with you. So I'll share one about the gang associations and how we end up getting people associated with gangs that gives them harsher punishments in our criminal justice system. We know for case law that that Judge Stuart Scott, who was a previous prosecutor in the DA's office and a really good friend of Jeff Rosen's, set up a gang enhancement charge in a criminal case. And he was found to have been engaging in prosecutorial misconduct, which is really kind of the culture of our DA's office. And now he sits alongside you, Judge Zahner, in our family court as a judge. And he was publicly admonished early on in his career, and his conduct in family cases has not gotten any better. But I got a phone call from somebody inside of our jails about a criminal enhancement that was done through some shenanigans with the district attorney's office and missing evidence. And there are new bills that are passing in California, and yesterday I was speaking with a criminal attorney, and he told me that it's being called the Rosen bill because Rosen is so famous for hiding exculpatory evidence in cases that his office prosecutes. But this poor man told me that he was put in jail and he had a public defender and the system failed him, as we know that it does, and that paperwork went missing, and then his public defender tried to find it and couldn't get it out. He sent me his files, and I now have those files, and I'm going through those files. He made a court call from jail. That was my first time accepting a court call from jail, and I know that it's recorded. And what was interesting to me was that this man was talking about how he got falsely labeled with a criminal enhancement, and yet he's in jail, and in our main jail there are no resources for this man to do any of his criminal work, to do any investigations, any research like there would be for him in prison. So I think that we're going to have to start looking at that in our jails, and we're going to have to start thinking about these criminal enhancements.
Thank you very much. Report from the sheriff on countywide criminal activity. Is there a presentation? Thank you.
Yes, we have Captain Dalia Rodriguez and our management analyst, Angel, here to present.
Good afternoon. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay. Perfect. You have the report was issued to the board, and we're here to answer any potential questions that you may have in regards to the report. And with me is our management analyst, Angel Ekdow. I'm sorry.
I have no questions, Madam Chair.
I had just a couple of questions. Does the sheriff track data on how the firearms were procured, and do we have a process for confiscating those weapons?
That is not part of this report. I think that you're thinking about another report.
The criminal gang activity?
We're on number 4.
Right. Yep. Number 4, criminal gang activity. This notes 10% of the nonviolent attacks. It may be. Move on to a different question. According to this report of item 4, nearly 30% of all gang-related cases also include a parole or probation violation. This potentially is an area of opportunity because these individuals already have a relationship with the county and are known to us. Might we consider targeting this group for gang prevention programming?
I believe that's part of the part of when they actually come out of jail, where they're released from jail, then they do get access to different types of programs within the county. But that is something that the jail keeps track of.
And finally, can we have in future reports maybe a more detailed breakdown of the age groups? I would be interested in seeing the numbers that are broken down for youths ages 19 to 25, particularly because this population is eligible for placement in juvenile hall, but it's difficult to determine how many would be eligible given the way that the data is currently presented, and maybe the same data request for youth 12 and under. County policy dictates that we divert these youth from juvenile hall whenever possible, and it's hard to get a sense of all of the data.
So that's going to be a little bit difficult simply because we are the initial responders to a particular crime, but the sheriff's office doesn't necessarily track what kind of programs they're given once they go into probation. So probation has a decision on whether they're going to put them in different types of programs or if they're going to give them any type of diversion, but we don't keep track of that information.
Do you track the ages?
We do track the ages, but again, the information that we provide is based on the initial call, like the initial response to that particular incident. It doesn't necessarily mean that those individuals are going to be charged with a crime or given any type of diversion type programs. It's because we don't see it we don't see the arrest all the way to that very end, to when they're charged. If that makes sense.
Okay, I'll follow up a little bit more off agenda. I do have a few more questions, but I'll hold those right now. May I have a motion to approve item 5?
It's item 4 that we're on
Item 4.
right now, and you don't have any speaker cards, correct? Okay.
Item 4.
And we don't even need a motion, so we'll receive report.
Receive the report. Thank you. We have one card on item 5 that doesn't have a name, and I'll also note now, just to make sure that all of our speakers have an opportunity to speak, that I'm going to ask to hold item 12 today, not because it's placed after the agenda, but because we've been receiving information literally until about an hour ago, and it's just not sufficient time to be able to thoroughly digest the information and be able to have a substantive conversation. So I will hold that, but we do have a speaker on item 12, so I'm going to call up together the speaker on item 5, who did not provide a name, and the speaker for item 12, which is Susan Bassi.
I'm the speaker for both, so I'll take my 4 minutes for each, 2 minutes for each. On item 5, I've sat through a lot of these meetings, or I have seen videotape that Mr. Largent has taken about these meetings. And what is really disturbing to me is that when you are looking at juvenile issues, whether it's in law enforcement or our courts or what have you, you are completely missing issues arising from our family courts. They are literally like their own jurisdiction over there. They're doing whatever they want. They're making up the law. They're issuing DVROs right and left depending on which attorney is paying them the most money. And there are kids who are cutting their wrists, who are trying to get money. They're on drugs. They don't know how to deal with their parents' divorce cases. And these cause lifelong problems. They cause problems with relationships between the parent and child. They're separating families over there. You all act appalled at what's going on at our border, but you're doing it across town in our courts every single day. I have moms who have not seen their children for 4 to 10 years, and those moms had no criminal history. No, they did nothing wrong, but they got labeled crazy. They got in front of biased judges who believed that these women should be punished. Their children were told they didn't want to see them, and they were taken. Imagine the psychological impact of that. And nowhere are you catching the statistics of how many of these juvenile offenses arise from children who come from homes that went through nasty divorce or custody cases in our local courts. Our judges are failing, Judge Zahner, and you need to take that message back to the court. You are not equipped to deal with the emotional issues of children and what you are doing to them in a divorce where there should be shared parenting, and if the parent is dangerous, our criminal courts need to deal with it. Not let Jeff Rosen be lazy and shift it off to his buddy, James Towery in family court. Start looking at where these problems arise. They're arising in our family court.
You want to speak on item 12 as well?
I want to speak on item 12. Thank you for reminding me, Ms. Ellenberg. I have been really disturbed at how this Board of Supervisors and all the various committees have treated our sheriff. If you even looked at Jeff Rosen's office, which he makes more money, his office spends more money, and they do more harm in our community than they do good. And you are not looking at that office. You continue to attack police officers, and you continue to put Lori Smith front and center of Mr. Rosen's attacks. It is common knowledge that Mr. Rosen does not like Ms. Smith. It's common knowledge, and you all know it, and you're pandering to it. You're allowing him to intimidate and harass and check every dollar that that office spends. You tell her to spend more money on overtime, and then you chastise her for doing it. 90% of police officers are good. We are seeing a lot in the media right now about bad cops. There are bad cops. There are many more bad lawyers than there are bad cops. And it's time to start paying attention to this. It's time to start listening to what the public is talking about. Mr. Rosen went on damage control. He always wants to get in on the latest issue ahead of a campaign. So he was on KTVU this week talking about police misconduct. If you look at his speech, he talks about how the public is misguided and how his office successfully prosecuted PC-148s, which are interfering with police officers doing their job. I'm being charged with that by Mr. Rosen for videotaping police beating up on a father in a court file room. I will take that video to the court of public opinion and a jury any day. It is time for you to stop beating up on Lori Smith, to start giving these officers the resources they need on the front lines of domestic violence. And no, Susan Ellenberg, our domestic violence committees are not successful or informative. They keep it in a secret. They don't film those meetings, and you're failing at it.
Supervisor Wasserman, do you have any questions on item 5, the Sheriff Juvenile Offenders Report?
And nothing to add from
We don't have anything to add. We're just here to answer any potential questions you may have.
on 5 now. Thank
Right.
you.
Yes.
Yep, no, I'm good.
Of the 1,016 cases that involved a juvenile offender, do you know, is that an unduplicated count, duplicated? Can you parse that out?
Can you explain what you mean by duplicated?
Is it 1,016 separate juveniles, or are you counting juveniles that...
Individual cases.
So not repeat offenders, not juveniles that are
Correct.
charged
Yeah, that number
with
is
multiple?
Well, it could be a juvenile who has committed multiple crimes or been an offender.
So that's my question.
That's correct.
So it's
Yes.
not necessarily 1,016
unique
individuals.
Correct.
Unique individuals.
Correct.
Can I'd like to have a breakdown of what those numbers are, because it's potentially skewing. It sounds like it's a tremendous concerning number, and if 60 or 70% of those crimes, that's probably an unrealistic statistic, are being perpetrated by a small number, that gives us a very different picture of the level of juvenile crime.
I think it's also important to understand that that number looks at the total number of incidents in the sheriff's report case data. So that could include incidents that were not looked at, the 432 cases that were looked at later, in terms of involving assault, robbery, stolen vehicle, carjackings. So those 1,016 are not necessarily the total number of juveniles involved in those types of incidents. Does that make sense? They could have, it could be something as simple as maybe a marijuana possession incident. So it could be infractions or smaller crimes, shoplifting, things like that.
So I think that breakdown is really important, because the number can create panic and concern that juvenile crime is on the rise, is dramatically increasing, and people, I think most of the public, will presume when they hear juvenile crime that it is violent crime. So having a breakdown of unduplicated offenders and the types of crimes, I think could provide a much more realistic picture of what we're really looking at with juveniles, and also to how we might better address it. You noted that a number of them are not actively known, and I'm wondering, can we cross-check against, and I guess this would be a question perhaps for Chief Garnett as well, can we cross-check against juvenile probation, child welfare, foster care, or any of the other SSA agencies? I'm thinking similarly to the work that we're trying to do for adults in reentry that's coming up in item number 7. Can we think about data sharing in that same way for our youthful offenders?
So I understand the concern in regards to obviously 1,016 does sound alarming, but that's the reason why we broke it down to 432 cases that were more related to actual violent offenses like assault, robbery, stolen vehicles, carjacking. And then from those, that's where we actually reviewed the data, because the other cases were, again, minor offenses that may or may not have even gone to probation. Your second question in regards to how you want it to be tracked, that is definitely something that probation can potentially do, simply because they do have the ability to track those individuals once they're in the system.
And that 457 number, is that unduplicated? Is that 457 different youths?
That's 432 cases.
32, sorry.
Yeah,
Excuse me.
432 cases. And it could be duplicated if they were involved in other, like for example, one can be a carjacking, and then a couple months later they can do an assault.
If I may, through the chair, Madam Chair, I think what the chair is saying on the 432 more violent ones that you've identified, it's possible that 300 individuals have committed those 400, and some were charged with multiple offenses. So I believe, and please correct me if I'm wrong, what the chair is asking is in future reports, exactly how many individuals committed crime. Because when one person commits 3 crimes, if the public hears 3 crimes versus 1 crime, they think there's more crime versus less crime. And we know that many times when an individual perhaps takes a car, they might hit somebody, which is a crime, takes a car, which is a crime, speeds, which is a crime.
Have drugs in the car.
And have that kind of thing. So I believe that's what you were asking
I thought
for?
that's what I was asking for, yes.
Great.
Didn't realize that wasn't clear. All right. Thank you. So we can do that going forward with future reports.
Yes, absolutely. We can make it a little bit more, a little bit more, so that it doesn't seem like it's an alarming rate. Yes, I understand that.
Or if it truly is an alarming rate, we need to know that too, so
Either way,
that we can respond appropriately.
Yes, absolutely.
Thank you very much. Do you want to accept our report?
I would say item 5 is accepted. Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you very much.
And we also had the motion to hold number 12. So that was done.
Right. And we have, thank you. 6 and 7, we move to consent. Item 8, we have one speaker unnamed, and we have a second speaker on item 12 that I'll take at this time as well, since we are not hearing item 12 today. And that is Scott Largent.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone. Kind of getting used to the podium over here, so my voice is not as loud in here. So I was a little confused because earlier in the week I got the regular agenda out in the hallway, and then we revised it, and now this item's being taken off. So, I mean, I'm not all conspiratorial. Then I did a little more research and remembered the last supervisor meeting when the item came up for the overtime for the Sheriff's Department. I have attended every single meeting involving the jail reform for the last 3.5 years. And all you would hear is pull it from overtime. Do whatever you need to do. We need to implement these reforms. I mean, that was just this constant push on Lori Smith. So now why are we using her as a doormat and saying that she overspent all this money in our jails? There was, I believe, 672 recommendations in our jails. That takes a lot of money, a lot of time. I mean, they've added service. I mean, we know everything that's been done. The board is telling Lori Smith to do all of this. So what's going on here? Why are we putting this back on the agenda right here to try to blame Lori Smith for overspending? I am confused right here. I worry it's just another hit on the sheriff. I've done my research for a long time. I spent 2 years in here criticizing the Sheriff's Department, and then I really did my homework. And I figured out what was really going on. And I figured out the mistakes in our county executive's office, and I figured out what the real scam was. And I don't want to see our sheriff being used as a doormat anymore. Lori Smith has stepped up to the plate to start to protect our civil rights. She's starting to protect the rights of victims in our county, and she's starting to do what this man over here, our district attorney, cannot do, okay? So our community needs a sheriff like that, and I'm going to say it how I see it, and I think you guys need to stop throwing Lori Smith under the bus, please. Thank you.
Thank you. It's just 1 second to
Yes.
reset, please. Go ahead.
So I'm going to talk on item number 8, and I grabbed the committee member memo that Ms. Ellenberg did that's posted in the back, and I looked over the things that she said we might do. And we continue to completely ignore 50% of the people in this community who are dealing with our family courts, where there are mental health issues, domestic violence issues, everything else. The money is not going to help those people. Mr. Largent has been on supervised visits. That means that he has to pay $100 a week to see his daughter. I bet you guys don't cough that up for a babysitter. And Mr. Rosen, if your daughters are making that money babysitting, then you ought to be disclosing it as income. That is not something we as a community need to be doing. There is nothing wrong with Scott. He doesn't have a criminal record. There is no reason for him to do this. These judges are giving out orders like candy to certain attorneys. And Judge Zahner, your ends of court and everything else, you know you have created a culture where attorneys and judges are buying orders and you're ignoring the public that you are elected to serve. Ms. Ellenberg, if you do not address the scam of private judging where millions of dollars have come from our courts, they belong in our courts, taxpayers pay for these things to be done in our courts, into private judging where they are not being supervised, where women are losing their homes, where children are being separated from families, and where a lawyer with an axe to grind is issuing orders that ruin people's lives. You must address private judging under CCP 638 and 639 in this county. It is a public corruption issue. It is an issue that affects our families. You need to start discussing the real issues in this community, not what you perceive those issues to be. Thank you.
Thank you. So on item 8, first I will express appreciation for all of you. We are still figuring out the nuts and bolts of meeting leading here, so appreciate your patience and indulgence. And particularly what I'm looking for this committee is to use our time for conversation in order to really take advantage, frankly, of the talent and experience that's here. So I want to thank you in advance for your willingness to ask big questions and use our time going forward that way. The document that you have before you is a summary of some of my ideas as well as some of the ideas that were initially shared with me. I am certainly not wedded to them, and we all know that I am the newest one up here. So my hope is that once you've had a chance to look at them and share your feedback as well as share ideas of topics that you would be interested in discussing, my hope is that maybe we'll reach a consensus on at least a couple of items that we'd like to focus our attention on. I'm hoping that this will be a largely organic process. If new topics arise through the discussions that we want to address, I want us to be able to have the flexibility to explore different paths and new partnerships. We certainly don't have to plan the whole year right now, but I would love to get us started. So interested in hearing your thoughts. Chief Garnett.
So I like these ideas and definitely want to talk about those. I'd like to throw one out. I think the issue of juvenile crime and violent crime, if it's not violent crime, if they're recidivist, if they're not recidivist, I think it's time that we really look at this and with everybody bringing their own data to the table and mapping it out, because there's multiple decision points. And my suggestion is that we focus only on youth that are using, just a discrete population so that we can really dig deep of youth that are using a weapon in the commission of an offense. So if you've got a youth on video in a residential burglary and they're waving around guns, which we see, they've used a gun in the commission of the offense because somebody could come home. If you pull over a car and they have a gun under the seat, then they weren't using it in the commission of the offense. But our armed robberies, our armed carjackings, the Resbergs, the cases that are really giving people heartburn, I think we really need to map these out and kind of get our arms around it. My suggestion is that we go from age 12 to 21, but I'm fine just going up to 17 as well. I do think that 18 to 21 is a pretty active group as well.
Thank you. Anyone else have thoughts on that one? Is there? Other interest, consensus around that idea is an important one? I used to teach middle school. I can wait.
I would like to echo, Madam Chairman.
Yes, there you are.
I would like to echo Chief Garnett's ideas. I think that when we begin with sort of a data analysis and take kind of a deep dive into what each department has and look at what it says, I think that would be a really important starting point. I mean, we see, even in today's reports, we see the cross-reference with juvenile crime. I think there are a lot of opportunities and there's a lot of work being done in juvenile court to address these issues, but I think this could be a very important forum for us to move some of those agenda items forward. I think that there's a couple of changes in the landscape, the legal landscape, that make that now a very critical issue for all of us. So I think Chief Garnett's idea is a really good one, and it could really address some of the issues that we're also exploring. So, for example, the cross-reference of a youth that could be involved in the juvenile system that is also part of that DCSS, that is also touched by having an incarcerated parent, which led to the reason why they're in detention in the first place. I mean, and I see your emphasis on families, and I think that is a very well-placed emphasis, because the family is a nucleus, and we as a county also operate as a family, but we're not cross-collaborating and cross-referencing as often. And if that could be the glue that this committee serves as, I think that could be very effective.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Other thoughts?
Yes, the DA's office collects data on all of the individuals that we file charges on. So we have what we think of as pretty complete records on anyone that we filed charges on, and certainly any of the kids that we're talking about, 12 to 17, or if you want to say 12 to 21, who've used a gun in the commission of a crime. We have the universe of those cases, the numbers, and obviously we have prior criminal history, which is not public information, and we also have the information about how they were, to the extent that the cases have already been resolved, as to what the accountability or sentence in juvenile or adult court is. So if we're going to have a study session about juvenile crime, we're happy to send around to the committee prior to that happening what our information about juvenile crime is. I think it's a good topic. Only thing I would, and I think it's good to focus on the serious offenders, as Chief Garnett said. What I would just add in terms of what I view as crimes that this committee should be speaking about is, I would say, anything from residential burglary up. And in terms of using a gun in the commission of a crime, frankly, given what we know about the brain development of teenagers, if there's a gun in the car, I think that's a case we should be looking and thinking about, because the reason that teenagers are so dangerous with weapons is because of the lack of brain development and not understanding consequences. So, with those small caveats, I certainly think this would be something for us to discuss. Good thing for us to discuss.
Thank you.
What I'd like to add is, I think as we go through the statistics, what we should also really look at and think about is the programming that has already been used and what programming is successful. I mean, part of the process obviously is identifying what the issue is or where the problems are, but at the end of the day, I think we want to get towards the solutions. And I know that probation invests a lot in many different programs, and culling out and figuring out which ones are statistically most likely to be successful, especially in these type of incidences, I think should be part of the primary focus of anything we do in terms of a data review.
Great add, thank you. Other thoughts either on this topic or other suggestions you may have come with?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Something from the Sheriff's Office says jail issues have been such hot topics. We do have some ideas, and of course, after, getting input from everybody else, we can pick and choose as to which one we can go with. First of all, going forward, maybe review of inmate grievance data. I know that that's something that everybody's interested in knowing. For something that we as PSJC can discuss. Jail consent decrees, I know it's getting finalized as we speak. I think sometime next week that there's going to be a hearing about that to finally get the court seal on it. And update on bail reform efforts too is something that we can look into. Update on our new jail. I know it's going to be a several-year-long capital project, so it may take a little while. So can talk about some of those efforts and what's been going on with that. And lastly, update on civilian oversight efforts. I know that the committee is being formed as we speak, and we have the first meeting tomorrow. And if we can maybe spend some time discussing that too, that'll be great. So I know I threw a lot out there, but if you guys were taking notes, of course, you will know what I was talking about. So we can pick and choose.
Thank you, Sheriff. Yeah, of course, I was taking notes. And I just want to make a distinction. Are these all topics of conversation, or when you say updates, do you mean receive a report?
No, that kind of goes back to just kind of discuss and provide study session. So that goes back to your request for the ideas.
Okay.
Yes. So by the way, Madam Chair, that comment was not towards you about taking notes. It's for everybody else. So I hope you did not take it the wrong way.
Absolutely fine. Thank you. Anything else?
To kind of coattail off of the prior comments about the jail reform issue, and one of the things I would share is I think there's a lot of work that's done throughout the county in various working groups that oftentimes I'm surprised is going on and I'm not necessarily in the loop on. And I know that, for instance, we're currently discussing different ways to address pretrial detention and jail reform issues. But when I think about that topic and its relationship to families and really the destabilizing effect of it, I think it's a fantastic topic for us to discuss. I'm not sure exactly whether that is a topic that is taken on by this committee or that we bring this information forward based on some of the other working group activities that are underway. But thinking about targeted ways to address pretrial detention, in short, because, and I think that certainly Gary Hersig and Aaron Johnson can comment on this, we really understand, or it appears that there's a massive destabilizing effect in those first 48 hours people are in custody. So thinking about targeting or how we target obviously both community safety, but the issues that relate to destabilizing not only that single individual, but frankly how that kind of is a drop or a stone in the pond that has these concentric circle effects out into our community, in particular the family, the children, the spouses. So I think that that's a fantastic topic we should think about. And then the other area that has been on my mind, and I think my office's mind in recent months, is what we're seeing statistically with the homeless death rates. And we discussed that during a Prop 47 grant meeting today, but this is the issue in essence, in a nutshell, which is we've seen a rather substantial spike in the homeless population and the death rates year over year from around 2014. Within 2 years, it almost doubled. So we were somewhere at 70, and now we're almost at 140. We're probably expecting about 150 in the homeless population that died in our community in 2018. And it appears there may be statistics that suggest that they had recent contact with the criminal justice system. Maybe as close to as in several weeks before their death was discovered, or they were discovered to have died. And so thinking about this as an opportunity or their time in our criminal justice system as a portal for intervention and hopefully reducing those rates. Because if you think about 150 homeless people dying a year and compare it even to the homicide rate, it's maybe triple of the homicides that we have in this county. So it's a very alarming and discouraging number. So thinking about that population, and oftentimes that population also includes mental health and co-occurring diagnosis with substance abuse. So thinking about how we, in essence, assess these people potentially as they're leaving the jail and how we get them wraparound services within that first 48 hours or 2 weeks of exiting our jail. I would throw that in as a really concerning issue.
Thank you.
As a follow-up there, and just to add a couple more, I know that bail reform was taking on a lot of, it affects each individual department here differently, especially our office. But, we've had things occur with Senate Bill 10 being passed and then put on the referendum for the ballot next year. But we're seeing cases resolve themselves. In the Buffin case out of San Francisco resolved earlier this week, and that's going to have an impact. And so I think as it relates to this group, about just having that general discussion about what the response or what that looks like for the individual partners here, I think another area that I think a lot of us are doing individually is our race and ethnic disparity work, and trying to recognize where we're meeting some goals there or having some things to work on there. But I think it affects all of us again differently. But we'd like to be able to, I think in just some conversation we had during our own project, we'd like to have some more structured from entry all the way through prosecution, and see kind of where we can have a little more effect and be more purposeful with the work that we're doing. And then from the suggestions that you put in, I think another one of those items that we looked at during our own race and ethnic disparity work is seeing how many touch points we all share, not just for the panel here, but how it crosses over into public health and mental health and behavioral health and the different work through reentry, and how many different people we're all touching and doing different things with the same population. So how we best divert those folks into the proper care and treatment.
Thank you.
Sorry. Dr. Jordan wasn't able to join us today. However, she did send a statement with me of her suggestions, so I would like to read that off.
Thank you very much.
So with the jail reform currently underway, including plans for building the new jail, mental health training to correction officers and deputies is mandatory. Although we have subject matter experts in the county, Dr. Jordan would like to hear directly from the correction officers and deputies about their thoughts on the training before any training is implemented. Specifically, are they welcoming of the training, and who do they want to do the training? What they would like to see incorporated into the training, whether they are interested in a mixture of didactic and hands-on training modules and resources that they would like to have available to them from the subject matter experts. Their thoughts would be solicited anonymously through a survey monkey. Dr. Jordan thinks the input of the end users and their vision of training beforehand would help guide our community and the subject matter experts to deliver the best quality training to officers, deputies on the streets and in the jails, and ultimately to our community. Dr. Jordan would also like to see the medical examiner coroners participate in any training on the subject of tasers and excited delirium, with emphasis on potential causes of death.
Thank you. For the very beginning, what was the type of training that you were initially referring to before tasers?
I believe it's the mental health training.
Mental health training, right. Thank you. Anything else? If I can possibly, not even summarize, but just hit some of the topics that were broached today and really all sound vital from my perspective. Juvenile crime with a weapon, disproportionality, bail reform, homelessness, the deaths of folks who are homeless and their touch points with the criminal justice system. I'm wondering if amongst those topics, tell me if I missed anything. The jail reform we hear as a whole board, but I'm totally happy to talk about how we might explore that further in this committee, as well as the civilian oversight piece. Of the topics that have been raised thus far, are there a couple that stand out as being particularly appropriate for all of your departments? Something where everyone might feel some input or skin in the game or desire to weigh in?
Supervisor, can I let you know that people in the audience haven't seen this, and I was wondering if...
It is,
Oh, is
sorry
it
if I
in the
didn't
back?
say that. Thank you very much. There are printed copies in the back, and if they have run out, my team member Yvonne back there can run off more copies.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Thank you. So what would we like to start with? Supervisor Wasserman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. If I can maybe make a suggestion. Your office came up with a list of 8 items, 8 bulleted items that you had on the back table that I think we're all just kind of seeing for the first time. And I think you've heard half a dozen suggestions here where there's different, depends who you talk to, clients, offenders, they're all called different names depending on who's helping or assisting. But there's a lot of cross interaction. This reminds me a lot of when I first got here and the homeless issue was brought up to me, and I was co-chair of Destination Home, and we heard that there was homeless involvement over here and homeless involvement over here and over here, and they were all individual silos. And we didn't really know the total involvement, or in this case, the cost of a homeless individual. And I think what I'm hearing today from the various representatives we have here on this committee are the way that there's a lot of duplication, triplication, interaction between, if it's at the probation level, if it's the public defender level, district attorney, IDO, whatever it might be. And I think what you've received today in response to your idea about study session, future study session topics is good input. And I think perhaps, I know you've been taking notes, I know your staff members been taking notes. Perhaps you and I can get together between now and the next meeting, look over some of these and bring some of them back as agendized items and give advance notice to these members who can then bring and contribute whatever they think might be helpful in any action or changes. I know you and I have a lot to learn from all that these individuals do. And I think we've also heard about where some people, although they're various department heads in their own right, there's this interaction, and I can feel the desire and the will here for various departments to work together to try and expedite, and I'll look out at you, Javier, I'll try and expedite the reduction of the recidivism rate, to try and expedite the recovery and the rehab that takes place in our jails or out on the streets in probation or whatever it might be. And I think we all have the common goal of wanting to reduce crime and to help rehabilitate those who are committing crime going forward. So I think what you've done here is kind of open the door to an idea. We've got good feedback here along with your list of 6 or 8. I think there's another 3 or 4 that we've heard today that now we can put together and perhaps bring forth a couple topics every couple of months for discussion here once we've given them the opportunity to gather information so they can perhaps report out about what's going on.
Thank you. Those are excellent suggestions. I have a question for council as to what my vice chair and I can do outside of this meeting in terms of coordinating, and how much can we reach out to the other committee members once they've had a chance to digest all of these, and then see if one or two topics rise to the top, rather than waiting until the next meeting. What's proper?
Well, if you're discussing study sections generally as you agendize it for this meeting, that would be something, that's probably appropriate to come here. But if you're talking about a specific agenda item, the Brown Act does allow you to confer regarding scheduling a particular item, so you could confer on that.
So we could send out some sort of poll or questions to the group and see what people would like to start with.
What would be best, if it's okay with you, is to work with our office to make sure that in that question is an embedded possibility of a discussion or a Brown Act violation, and we can help do the scheduling with you.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you. Any final comments on this? Thank you all very much for your input and for being willing to shift direction a little bit and use our time well. And that is certainly the goal. And if at some point it feels like this is not the best use, we will iterate and revise. Anything else?
I'm just saying the next meeting is my birthday, so somebody better bring chocolate. That's all I'm saying.
All right, then without objection, we are adjourned, and we'll see you next month with cake.
Gluten-free, there you go.